I had always been the type to trust easily. My partner and I shared everything, or so I thought. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, one where everyone knew each other, and there was this one young neighbor, maybe in their early 20s, who had recently moved in next door. At first there wasn't much to say. They seemed friendly if not a little reserved, always offering a quick nod or polite smile whenever we crossed paths. I never thought much of it. But then, small things started to catch my attention. It began with late-night conversations in hushed tones, the kind that would make me wonder what was so secretive. At first I brushed it off. I mean, why wouldn't I? My relationship had always been stable. But as days turned into weeks, there was something about the way my partner interacted with them that didn't sit right. Casual glances seemed to linger just a little too long. The tone in their voice when they mentioned our neighbor, it was softer, more intimate. It didn't make sense, and yet it felt like there was something lurking beneath the surface. I couldn't pinpoint it at first. There wasn't anything concrete, just a gut feeling, the kind you push aside because you don't want to seem paranoid or insecure. I told myself I was overreacting. After all, my partner wouldn't do something like that. Not them. Not to me. But the nagging thoughts wouldn't go away. I started to notice patterns. My partner suddenly becoming more secretive with their phone, stepping out for quick errands more often than usual, and the neighbor seemed to be around a lot more. There were no accusations, no fights, just this growing unease that something was happening right under my nose. I'd catch glimpses of my partner exchanging looks with the neighbor from across the street. Once, when I arrived home earlier than expected, I saw the two of them standing a bit too close in our driveway, talking in hushed voices. My partner quickly waved it off, saying they were just being friendly, but the interaction felt loaded, like there was more to it than they were willing to admit. I started to piece things together in my head, but I wasn't ready to confront anyone about it. What if I was wrong? What if I was making something out of nothing? I kept telling myself that I had no proof, and without proof, all I had were suspicions. And suspicions, I thought, could ruin relationships just as easily as the truth. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. It was there, lingering in the background, a constant whisper reminding me that something wasn't right. My partner's late-night text messages, the way they seemed to avoid eye contact whenever the neighbor was around, it all added up. It happened on a day I wasn't supposed to be home. I had left for work in the morning as usual, but an unexpected cancellation meant I could return early. I thought I'd surprise my partner. Grab some lunch, maybe spend the afternoon together. I didn't expect to walk into something that would turn my world upside down. As I parked the car, I noticed the neighbor's car in the driveway. My stomach twisted, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe they needed something, maybe it was just a quick visit. Still, something didn't sit right. I stepped into the house and immediately I could sense a shift in the air, like something had just happened, something I wasn't supposed to see. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I moved through the hallway, making my way to the living room. That's when I heard voices, soft, intimate, the kind of tone you use when you think no one else is listening. My heart began to race, my palms sweaty as I approached the door. I wasn't sure if I was ready to face whatever was on the other side, but at that moment, it felt like I didn't have a choice. I stood there, just out of sight, listening. Their words were barely audible, but the laughter, low, familiar, almost flirtatious, was unmistakable. It was my partner. And the neighbor. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was hearing, but deep down I already knew. This was it. The confirmation of everything I had feared. I peeked around the corner, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. And there they were, sitting too close, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that spoke volumes. It wasn't the kind of posture you have with someone you're just friendly with. Their hands brushed briefly, an act so subtle yet filled with meaning. That was all it took. My world crashed in that moment. I wanted to burst into the room, demand answers, but I couldn't move. I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. All the doubts, all the suspicions, they weren't just in my head. They were real, right in front of me. I couldn't bear to stay another second, but I couldn't leave either. I felt paralyzed, torn between confronting them and running as far away as I could. Instead, I stayed there, hidden, watching the betrayal unfold in front of me. Every laugh, every glance between them was a knife in my chest, confirming what I had hoped wasn't true. Eventually, I pulled myself away, retreating silently, my mind spinning. There was no denying it now. What I had seen could never be unseen. I left the house before they even knew I was there, my chest tight with rage, hurt, and betrayal. All the trust, all the love I had invested, it felt like it had been shattered in an instant. As I drove away, I realized there was no going back. I couldn't stay quiet any longer. The weight of what I had seen was crushing me, and every minute that passed only fueled the storm of emotions swirling inside me. I knew I had to confront my partner, but how? How do you even start that conversation? My mind kept replaying the image of them and the neighbor together, each glance, each touch a reminder of the betrayal. That evening when my partner came home, I didn't waste time with small talk. I wasn't in the mood for pretending everything was normal because it wasn't. The moment they stepped inside, I asked the question I already knew the answer to. What's going on between you and the neighbor? They froze, a look of confusion crossing their face, but I could see it, the flicker of guilt behind their eyes. There was a moment of silence, just long enough for the tension to grow unbearable. Then came the excuses. What are you talking about? We're just friends. But the words felt hollow, rehearsed, like they had prepared for this confrontation, never thinking it would actually happen. I wasn't buying it. I pressed harder, laying out everything I had noticed over the past few weeks. The secretive texts, the awkward body language, the way they seemed to gravitate toward the neighbor whenever they thought I wasn't looking. With each piece of evidence, their defenses weakened. The facade of innocence they tried to maintain began to crumble, and I could see the truth slowly sinking in. Finally, the denial stopped. My partner's shoulders slumped, and for the first time they couldn't meet my eyes. It wasn't supposed to happen, they whispered. The words hung in the air, and in that moment, the final thread holding our relationship together snapped. I felt a surge of anger but also a deep sadness. This wasn't the person I thought I knew. They tried to explain it, stumbling over their words, talking about how it started as harmless, how they never meant for things to go this far. But none of it mattered to me. An explanation couldn't undo what had already been done. My mind raced, replaying every moment of the last few months, looking for signs I had missed, wondering if I had been blind the whole time. I demanded to know more. Was it just emotional? Or had it crossed into something physical? The silence that followed was all the answer I needed. My chest tightened as they admitted it had gone further than they ever meant it to. There it was. The confirmation that every suspicion I'd tried to ignore was real. I wanted to scream, to throw accusations, but instead I just stood there, numb. There wasn't anything left to say. The damage was done. I had my answers, but they didn't bring any closure, only more questions. How could they do this? Why didn't they come to me when things started to fall apart? I didn't want to hear any more apologies. I didn't want to hear how sorry they were, or how they never wanted to hurt me. Because they already had. The words were meaningless now. The trust we had was gone, and no amount of regret could change that. In the days that followed, everything felt surreal. I kept replaying the confrontation in my head, but no matter how many times I went over it, the result was the same. There was no erasing what had happened. I tried to make sense of it all, but the answers, if there were any, weren't coming easily. Part of me still couldn't believe it, how quickly things had unraveled, how someone I had trusted so deeply could betray me so completely. The house felt different now, emptier, like all the warmth had been sucked out of it. My partner, or rather the person I used to know, tried to give me space, but even when we weren't speaking, the tension was suffocating. We had talked about everything, our future, our plans, what we wanted in life. And now all of it seemed meaningless. The promises we had made to each other were just words, easily broken and left behind. At first, I thought about leaving immediately. Walking away seemed like the only option. But then doubts crept in. Could we salvage anything? Could trust be rebuilt after something like this? I wasn't sure. I didn't know if I had it in me to forgive or if I even wanted to. Forgiveness felt like a betrayal of myself, like letting them off too easily for the pain they had caused. But I couldn't deny the history we shared, the life we had built together. Was it worth throwing all of that away over one mistake? Or was this betrayal a sign of something much deeper, something that couldn't be fixed? The neighbor had vanished, avoiding any interaction with me since the confrontation. Good, I thought. I didn't need to see them. I didn't need any more reminders of the affair. But their absence didn't erase the memories. Every time I passed their house, I felt that same tightness in my chest, a reminder of how fragile everything had been. In the end, I realized there were no easy answers. Relationships, trust, love, it's all so much more complicated than I had ever thought. People make mistakes, yes. But some mistakes cut too deep, and no amount of time or apologies can heal the wounds they leave behind. I wasn't sure if we could find our way back from this, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to try. Eventually, I had to decide for myself. I had to think about what I wanted, what I deserved. This wasn't just about them anymore, it was about me, my own healing, my own future. Staying in this relationship, trying to repair something so broken, felt like prolonging the inevitable. I had spent too long being consumed by their actions, their choices, their betrayal. Now it was time to focus on me. So I chose to walk away. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. I wasn't going to let their mistake define my life. There would be pain, sure, and healing wouldn't come quickly. But I knew in time I'd find peace again. I would rebuild on my terms without the weight of their betrayal holding me down. And in that decision I found my own kind of closure.